That was sneaky.
That's you guys. Mics are on. Welcome, everybody. Oh my gosh, thank you for being here and giving us your time during this 10th anniversary of Scala Days. This is our diversity and inclusion panel. You're probably not in the wrong room. It's the only session running right now, which is really fantastic. Thanks to all the organizers who made this happen, because we're incredibly excited to bring this to you today. My name is Sushila Sahai. I've been with Lightbend for 7 years, and I've been managing all the groups that are responsible for customer and employee success at the company. You know, as a minority female who's been in technology for more years than I like to admit, over about 30, let's say, diversity and inclusion have been a big part of my life and my thinking process throughout, from childhood. And some of the most insightful conversations I've had recently, especially, are with these folks on this panel. And so it is my privilege to bring this panel to you. And I really hope you guys enjoy the conversation. You can participate in the conversation by going to slido.com and entering the code RESPECT with a capital R and asking questions. So we will have time set aside for a Q&A. I think on behalf of all of us, you know, we believe that change is based on awareness, understanding, empathy, and that we'll develop those qualities and continue to develop those qualities with open conversation, open dialogue, and confronting the challenges that do exist. So once again, my privilege to welcome you guys. Immense gratitude for what you're about to do. It takes a lot of courage, so more power to you. Turning it over to you, Mike.
Right on. Wow, fantastic introduction. Thank you, Sushila.
Oh, thank you.
So I am privileged to moderate this panel today. And just as an introduction to myself, my name is Mike Kelland. I am the VP of Professional Services for Lightbend. And it's my pleasure to be up here to learn from the members of the panel and to build my own awareness and empathy on behalf of the audience. And so that's really why I'm here. I'd like to get our panel to introduce themselves, and maybe just to start us off, give us an idea of why inclusion is important to you in the environments you work in.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Tara Hernandez. I am an engineering manager at Google Cloud. I'm also an advisory board member of Women Who Code, which is a worldwide nonprofit supporting women in tech. I think we have some Swiss chapters. I'll have to look that up.
Yes, we worked with them.
Awesome. Diversity is really important to me for very practical reasons. The changing demographics in the United States certainly is where my focus has been, but in general in the world, mean that we need to be aware of the differences of people coming in who can impact individual companies in a positive way. Not focusing on what those are has been proven in many studies that are emerging that companies that are more diverse are more successful. Certainly from a employee pool where you can hire, or from your customer base, being too sort of homogenized in how we approach high-tech industry makes less sense as the years go on.
Cool. Thanks, Tara. Kiki.
Great, yeah. My name is Kiki Carter. I'm a global solutions architect with Lightbend. And why I feel inclusion is important, it echoes a little bit of what Tara said. I mean, it's very practical, actually, to have a diverse workforce, not only because you have a diversity of ideas, but you have a diversity of experience and real experiences that people have had around the world. And those experiences themselves lend into the solutions that people are creating. I mean, everything that we're doing, whether it's code, architecture, whatever you're working on, it's all for the purpose of solving specific solutions. And usually those solutions are around marketing to people or consumerism or healthcare or things like that. And you have a very diverse pool of people in the real world. So having that knowledge to bring to your solutions becomes very important in practically why companies who focus on this are more successful.
Tara?
Oh.
Old
Thank you.
llama.
Yeah, and the llama. So the llama is officially named Dariana. So you know. First, really, thank you for asking me to be on this panel. I still have no idea why, but I'm going to try. I'm trying my best, and as everybody knows here, I'm a bit exhausted from the last week. So I have some notes, and don't mind if I sometimes I look at them. So to introduce myself, Heather helped me do this, so bear with me. I'm running the communications and community and communication side of the Scala Center. And my goal in this role is to build a stronger, more connected, and more inclusive Scala community. Now, what I heard here, you were asking why is
To you.
why is inclusivity important? And then you pick up the answer and you started speaking about diversity, and then somehow you spoke about diversity and inclusivity. And then I would like to end this round by saying that diversity is a fact on the planet, whether it's gender, culture, point in life, point of view. I mean, diversity, that's where we live. And inclusivity is something that I'm focusing on in my work. And what we are going to speak later on, or maybe immediately, is how I integrated all the feedback and working with diverse people and how I included their feedback in Scala Days that we are having today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's going to be a great topic for us to get to for sure. Hal, over to you.
Hi.
Oh,
Okay, so hopefully you can all hear me okay. So I'm Howell Evans, and I've been with Lightbend about 7 years now, and I'm part of the global solution architecture team. And and really, I think one of the biggest reasons inclusion in the workplace is important to me is it's important for everybody to have the same opportunities and fair treatment, right? Everybody needs to be on a level playing field from that regard, and I think that's something that people are still trying to figure out how to do effectively. But once you kind of get your head into the right space of how to be inclusive and how to deal with and appreciate the diversity in the workforce, you're going to get a company's going to work better, right? You've got a lot of rich experiences that people are bringing to the table, and by making sure these people are included in the conversation and are appreciated, then your company is just going to be better from from that standpoint too. So it's there's a number of different reasons, but I hope that kind of summarizes why for me.
absolutely. Yeah. And Hal, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you couldn't be here in person, but being here like this is fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So I was going to ask, and I feel like we've actually answered this question pretty well, but if you guys have anything more to add on this, organizations as a whole, and the organizations we work in and we play in and everything like that, there are some real concrete benefits to having an inclusive culture that nurtures diversity. Do you guys have any more sort of thoughts on why is that so critical? Because I think one of the things for me and for the audience and in general we need to think about is this isn't just a nice thing to do, right? This is a necessary thing in a lot of cases, and it's something that will be more competitive, we'll be better off. Sarah, please.
Certainly, there's a ton of examples of where failing to have some kind of diversity within your workforce has been fairly catastrophic. One of my favorites is the racist soap dispensers. If you go onto YouTube and you search for racist soap dispensers, you'll see this poor guy, I think he's from Nigeria, and he's in a bathroom and he keeps sticking his hand under the soap dispenser and it won't give him any soap. And his friend comes over and sticks his hand under and it works just great. He ends up having to put a white towel on his hand and now he will get soap, right? I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. If you had one dark-skinned person, I think Sushila said she ran into the same problem. So
United
watch out
Airlines,
for those racist
Terminal
soap dispensers.
3,
Yeah.
DIA.
Another one that is pretty awesome is I worked at a company that did a lot of graphics and focus on VR. It turns out that Oculus and HGC, whatever the two big companies are, I don't think either of them really had any women on their hardware teams, because if they had, they probably would have discovered what was discovered after the hardware was released, that as many as 78% of women get motion sickness in the current designs. So in the United States alone, which is 51% female, which was the main market, that is a huge segment of potential customer base that you've just eliminated because they're going to throw up if they use your product, right? So these are the kinds of things that it would be really helpful if you had some kind of variety on your teams. And we could probably sit here and go many other examples, but those are two of my favorite. And it just, again, going back to, yes, it is the right thing to do. We should all be respectful and supportive of each other. We all have a lot of really good things to bring, but it's also a really practical thing to do. We need to not be having our heads in the sand that we all think alike or react in the same ways.
So even from a very concrete outbound to the customer perspective, like this is impacting
absolutely
half the market in that case. Yeah, that's wild. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Did you want to add anything to how organizations are going to benefit, or maybe how they're not, like how they're going to fail if they don't?
Absolutely. I mean, there is the thing that you'll fail if you don't.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that is an okay thing, right? Maybe maybe the world itself is creating a place where your market share or your success in business is going to depend on you being able to be not only aware of the changing global space, but being able to operate in that space and take advantage of that space. So maybe, I mean, it is going to either weed people out who haven't taken those steps or cause another type of tension that we may need in order to see certain shifts and change in the world. I mean, yes, it is the right thing to do for various reasons, but it's also, maybe it's going to play into capitalism, which, if you're trying to be successful with that, or any other type of consumerism you want to be successful with, it's possible.
Yep. Yeah, critical, right? Daria, you work in an organization that is a nonprofit, right? And so we're not talking so much about, making a profit or not, but the success factors. I mean, how does inclusion and diversity affect your success factors in a nonprofit environment?
This is a super complex topic, but I'm going to try to fit it in like a minute or two. So one thing that I really like the fact that I'm going a bit later because I can just add my little stone. So in my case, the team that I have around me is not really my first team because they're engineers and I'm working with the community. So my team is, again, I'm back to the point, my team is a very diverse people around the world that I cannot control or influence. There is no mechanism there. So when we are speaking about companies, there are mechanisms there. You have administrative part, you have HR, you have finances, boss, this and that. So you can actually have some kind of a thought in those processes that could make a change because there is a reason to make a change. In this case, I found in the last 2 years that my job is literally to listen and not to let any part of the community get too frustrated by not being heard and reacted to. Right. This is really something that is my learning, and that again brings me to Scala Days. It's just how do you, this is what I'm still in the process of thinking and working on it and learning a lot, especially since this morning's keynote, Bogdan Vasilescu, I don't know if he's in the house. I learned, and this is what I would like to quote, and he also brought that picture, and the picture is phenomenal, the photo, how if you make a progress for one group, you include one minority, it actually brings in more people. So he had this photo on which you have a person with a wheelchair crossing the street and on the ramp, and then after that you have people with the suitcases, the deliverers, and then you see all these other wheels that can also benefit from it. Right. So when you're listening to a piece of a segment of a group that has something to say, why not react? So I'm just privileged that my reactions to the feedback are still in the virtual world. And then just sometimes we get together and why not have fun and include everyone.
Yeah. So it's almost that it's accretive, right? Like if we start down the right path, then it gives us the pathways for all of the other people to come along as well, right? And there's 1 + 1 = 3 in a way, and how that goes. Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Hal, how about you from your perspective, from an organizational perspective, why is diversity and inclusion such a critical thing?
Sure. So really, I think I just want to talk about one of the points that Kiki brought up, and she brought up a great point about in the world marketplace. And I mean, if you can't be diverse with the people you work with, if you can't understand what they need and what drives them, then how can you possibly compete in the world? It's charity begins at home kind of thing. It's super important to be able to make sure you're putting on the right I guess face to the world. Making sure that you actually do understand the issues people are running into, and that you can build products and whatnot that actually help them address those kind of issues. Make sure you're targeting things correctly. So from a purely business standpoint, I think it makes total sense. But obviously, as Daria was saying, the more people that get involved, it's a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. It's you're building consensus almost magically.
Awesome.
So,
I had one quick thing I wanted to add to your point, which is inclusion in the concept of open source. In Google Cloud, we have a ton of open source offerings. Kubernetes is one, obviously Android, Chromium. One of the challenges that, from an open source perspective, is also one of language, right? English, for good or ill, is sort of the language of tech. Now that works out well for me because I can at least sort of speak English. But as we're here in a country where everyone speaks at least 5 languages, I think it's very intimidating. But it's also, you think there's 1 billion people who speak Mandarin and some small percentage that might speak English. There's another 1 billion people who speak Spanish, some small percentage that might speak English. And there's a whole wealth of emerging education systems that are supporting those communities that aren't really able to contribute to these products, and we're missing out. Mm-hmm. So localization is another aspect of inclusion that I think, particularly for any repository in GitHub, being able to localize at least the developer docs for that could be a whole new way of really inviting more people to come into our open source communities. So it's very wide. It's more than just people of color or gender or religion. There are so many different ways that you could look at diversity and inclusion.
So I've heard it said once that if you want the top 3% of the most competent people in the world, working on your project or working in your company or whatever, if you artificially limit the total pool, you don't actually have access to that top 3% of people, right? And that's kind of what you're sort of leading to here is like we have to be inviting in order to get all of the talent that we want associated with what we're doing, right? That's awesome. Thank you. So this event, I think it's been an amazing event, and it's gone so well. And I know Daria, you've been running around like crazy, but I don't think anybody's noticed. I think it's been amazing, and you've worked really hard to make it an inviting and inclusive event that fosters that diversity and bringing people in. So walk us through the process of that and how this all came together in that way.
This very easy question. Like I'm quickly going to run through what I did the last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
I gotta sit back here.
yeah. So no, thank you for your question, and thank you for your comments, and thank you everyone that approached me, and actually thank you for everyone that you are enjoying, because the first thing I said on this stage was please enjoy. And I think we dropped the mic last night when there was like a dance-off on the floor at the community dinner. It was just fantastic. It was really, for me, I knew that if I died there and then, because I could not breathe anymore, I was like, just don't wake me up. It's fine. I can go. So basically, for the last year's Scala Days, I was a part of the program committee, as a manager of program committee. And as such, I didn't have too many responsibilities, which gave me a very comfortable space to observe. So I was somewhat associated, so people would come and tell me things, but I was not super responsible, so I could not do much things for the particular event. And from that feedback that I gathered, Scala Days emerged this year. And what I've heard and what is integrated, and this is not a total of what can be, and hopefully everybody again can come with their stones and continue the snowball effect. I'm going to list those particular things that were happening around Scala Days, because I'm not sure if everybody really knows all the things that were happening around. But before I dive into the concrete points, I would just like to say that that now I learned, and I have a new found appreciation of conference organizers, meetup organizers, chat room moderators. Like there is like a sea of people that are doing something that I did this year. Because they are trying like to translate this diversity into inclusiveness that is materializing with people in a certain room, and it's not every time easy, especially if you're doing an event in Switzerland. Who can come to Switzerland? Who can stay in Switzerland? Who can, you know, so on and so on. I'm not going to go further than that. So with that said, I'm going to dive into what we did this year to make the most inclusive event we could with the cards that we had. And to translate, like, all the people that I'm speaking online actually could come, hopefully, here. So first, we were partnered with EPFL, which means that many of the events we were doing around and that were free, and even the workshops that were not free, were done at EPFL. So we could use the premises with subsidized or free, which then allowed us to lower the prices comparing to other Scala Days for about 25%. This year we had the student prices, which is not new, and I need to say this really once more. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Nothing would happen if there was not trust building over 9 years, and this is when I start crying. So I should better focus on my points. But yeah, I mean, I got to a point where there was just a little push needed to do this. This is all your work, from Lightband to Trifork and Diana especially, to each and every individual. So what I'm doing, this is literally a cherry on the cake. So student prices available, that's not new, but it was. Free daycare was new during the conference, which turned out to be a super nice success. And we have about 8 or 9 babies and toddlers just running around. Wow. Which brings me to the point of accompanying person option for partners. That are traveling, and on top of that, we organized a couple of tours in vineyards and in the city, so that the partners can eat here, they can go for tours, so they actually can experience the city or the region actually. Then we dedicated diversity scholarships, about 20 tickets, but it was actually more closer to 40. With travel budget assigned and accommodation and so forth. And we did it in conjunction, is that how you say? With the Scala user group organizers around the world. So we reached out to them so they can also directly reach to their communities and either raffle on the Scala Bridge or on different type of things that they are doing. And we were speaking with each and every sponsor, which we have about 25 sponsors, to encourage them to do the same, similar, whatever they could do. So we were very vocal about that. Then we also had free education surrounding events. So even if you could not come to the conference, which is very educational, but in the end it's going to be on YouTube. So, I mean, you don't really need to be here. But at the events, and you're just seeing us, you cannot communicate with us on stage, but on these events, in these events, there were 3 major ones. You can actually speak and work and learn and contribute with the actual authors and so on. So that was the one that should have been paid. But yeah, so that was happening on Monday and Tuesday during the day, collocating with Type Level Summit. And finally, having a community dinner yesterday in the one and only Olympic Museum, which I don't know if many people here understood also that there was a point. Yes, it's a beautiful venue, beautiful space. We love it all. But Olympics stand for very certain values of excellence, respect, and friendship. So that's why the community dinner was actually there, because there was a thought behind it, on top of the beauty of it. And this was the message for the community. I mean, this is what the values that we support and we should always have in mind. And the final point, and then I have to give you the time, is that my favorite part of all of that is volunteers, my volunteers that are in the house. Let's please one round of applause for volunteers.
Yeah.
job. It took about, I would say, 3 months of building the relationship with volunteers and finally onboarding them on Sunday so they can do the job that they're doing and solve problems as they're solving. Diana and I literally multiplied ourselves in 20 people. And it's just amazing. And the group of volunteers are diverse in a group of people coming from all sides of the world and all sides of the backgrounds and everything else. So this is what I just had to tell about the event, and what I was hearing is translated to this into this with a huge and enormous help and advice from Diana, who is like we are one dragon with two heads basically. But yeah, the concept was that, and this is what we have today.
That's awesome. And
didn't take too much
looking at it compared to previous years, do you feel like this has really brought in a more sort of diverse audience to the conference? And
I actually have a data point. We had a diversity and inclusion lunch yesterday organized by Zalando, which I was supposed to communicate a long time ago, and then I forgot. And then I did it yesterday morning for the lunch, and I was like, if we get 20 people, it's a success. That's a measure of success.
And how many did we have?
84.
84 people. Wow. Right on.
We ordered food for 60.
Yeah.
We were aiming high back in the day, but we even went.
Amazing.
And another point of a data point is when I go to the ladies' bathroom, the doors are opening and closing and opening and I'm like, am I at Scala Days, a tech conference? What's happening here? And
There's
not to
no
mention
better
the dancing.
measure of success.
That is the
Right.
measure I
If
always
there's a
use.
line
There's
in the women's
line, like,
restroom.
whoa, there are people here.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So
Way to go. That's great. And
cheers.
that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
cheers.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, so we're here. We're at an inclusive event, and we're having a panel on inclusivity and diversity. It's fantastic. This is wonderful. So, Hal, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your experience. I think that
Sure.
you might actually have to explain this, because seeing you over Zoom here, we don't actually we can't actually tell which sort of underrepresented group you actually are part of. So, and I think there's a sort of a level of invisibility around that I'd love for you to help us to sort of make visible to the audience here.
Sure. So thank you. So yeah, I should have one of those little mobility things that they have in the Big Bang Theory, where I can have a screen and drive around the stage or something. So I guess the part of the conversation I represent is invisible disabilities, and this started a number of years ago, but for me, over the last 7 years since I've been at Lightbend, it's something that's progressed quite rapidly for me. So where I am today is quite different from where I started, and having a physical disability is it's difficult for the person who's in that position, but it's even more difficult for the people you work with, because how do you deal with that? How do you help somebody who's just kind of, I guess, fading away over time, for want of a better word? And it's tough, and you can't. There's no prescription for dealing with something like this. Obviously, today, if I tried to stand up, yes, you'd see, that I have something wrong, so to speak. But there are many other types of invisible disabilities, like depression and things like that. So there's no recipe for helping people in that kind of situation. So I really believe that instead of trying to fix a problem and trying to be go overboard on inclusivity, it's just really kind of approach things with empathy, right? And this is something that really was drilled into me a few years ago now by one of my coworkers, and I could tell that he had something to say or something to talk about for a little while, but he kind of bided his time and watched and stood back. And one day just asked me to coffee, and no other reason than, yeah, let's go grab a cup of coffee. So we went and had a cup of coffee, and we just kind of naturally had a conversation about, well, hey, I see you've got some, got some problems. I can see you've got some, it's hard for you to do some things. And it was actually a wonderful experience, because I'd never imagined, that anybody would approach me like that. And it actually makes me teary-eyed to talk about it. But the point is that, had that not happened, I wouldn't be in the place I am today to actually want to talk about this. I've got a whole ton of things to talk about, so, but the thing is that, is really, as somebody with a disability, and a growing disability, there's things for me that might seem very, very minor to others, but by taking that approach of just talking to me and just, saying, well, hey, how can I help? Is there something I can help with? Are you comfortable with asking you if there's something I can help with? It was just a great approach. And I don't want to monopolize the floor here, but one thing is that, when people have, I can only speak for myself, but when people have disabilities, oftentimes, it's not actual help doing something that people are looking for.
Right.
It's just an understanding. So an example, so if I go grab a cup of coffee, so it's quite a ways to walk from the kitchen in our San Francisco office to my office. And, I walk kind of funny. And if somebody helped me or tried to help me do that, then, well, I'm competitive. So no, I don't need your help. This game on. I'm going to get to my office, and I don't care how much of this coffee I'm going to spill in the process. So, it's, so like I said, talking about it rather than directly trying to reach out and help blindly, I guess, was big for me. So, yeah. As I said, it's different for everybody, but I think, if you approach things from an empathetic standpoint, you can't go wrong.
Right. I really like what you're saying there, Hal, in terms of it's different for everybody, right? Which is really powerful, I think, right? It's the individual. We're talking about people. We're not talking about situations or conditions, or it's people to people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was like I said, it was the simplest thing, just a simple conversation, but meant so much. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that very much, Hal. And I think, for me and for us, I mean, on the audience and everything, understanding a little bit of that and sort of getting a sense for it in terms of building some of that empathy is really helpful and powerful. So thank you for sharing that very much, Hal. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
So, Kiki, I mean, just, there's invisible disabilities, there's and things like that, but there's also, I think there's a systemic sort of invisibility to the experience of people in underrepresented groups and people of color especially, and things like that, that oftentimes we don't, I say it's invisible because we don't feel it, right? We don't live that experience. Can you talk us through some of that and some of that experience and help share with the audience some of the empathy on that side of things as well?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's really important that Hal used the word empathy, because I would like to challenge this idea that you don't experience it or don't feel it, because there are many times I go into, I travel to many countries and different places, and I'm sure you yourself have traveled into a country and been standing somewhere where you're the only American. Or where you're the only, Canadian, or,
Canadian.
North American, right?
The 51st state.
Oh, come on now.
Right? Hey. And, or you've been somewhere where you've been the only person. There's no one here who can say they've not been somewhere where they've been the only person. And so you know how it feels to be the only whoever you are somewhere. You felt it. But the thing is, for you, it's just a temporary thing.
Yeah.
You know you're going home. You know you're going back to your place. You know you're going to your comfort zone, and your comfort zone just doesn't leave, right? And so you have that experience, and then you shed it, when you get back, whew, good, glad that's over. You know, I've seen it myself. I mean, I've worked in Malawi and other countries, and I've worked with white Americans who've gone there, and they're like, "Oh my God, I was so glad when we got back, and I could see another white person." I'm like, "Wow, you know, like you see how that feels? It's kind of hard to be the only one in a place, right? It feels some way." And so to imagine that you don't have to have that empathy anymore and understand, like to see people walk away from that type of experience and then shed it and not let it grow them to see that other people have that experience of, you know, not being the English speaker in the room, or not being the most eloquent person, or not being someone who can run 50 miles when everyone's like, "Hey everybody, let's go running," you know? You just forget it. And I think it's a willful selfishness and a willful ignoring. I don't think that it's accidental or, you know, oh, I didn't know what to do. Well, if you could reach back to a time where you felt like you were isolated, then maybe you would know what to do. The first thing being that, oh, I should recognize that other people are having this experience around me right now.
Right.
Right?
Well said.
I mean, that's just one simple thing with it, right?
Yeah.
So building empathy for that experience and maybe
Yeah.
trying to capture it.
Absolutely. Capturing those experiences and not shedding it when you leave, like, whew, I'm glad that's over. And then understanding that you walk into a room and there are other people, someone right beside you who may be experiencing that.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, actually. I mean, I've honestly never thought of it that way. I really haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully other people will
Yeah.
remember those experiences.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So in that experience, I mean, it's almost a matter of saying, of reaching in and trying to reach back out to people with the sense of that, and being able to say, hey, like, I can see you're in a situation where I once was, or I have temporarily been, rather, and come back out and try to channel that feeling, right?
Well, sure. Channeling the empathy that you'd get from that. And, you know, as we're talking about growing a community here, this is Scala community. This is, you know, they're developers. We work for companies or nonprofits. Taking that into those environments and understanding that people are feeling isolated. And that's why we use this word inclusion.
Yeah.
It's not about, you know, we need some quotas and we need to have this person and that person and blah, blah, blah. It's about removing those barriers of isolation and helping people understand you see them, not making everyone the same.
Yeah.
It's not that, oh,
Yeah.
then we're only going to do things that everyone wants to do, or we're only going to do all the same things and you know, things like that. It's just that making sure that you're aware about people, about doing things that are intentionally isolating to people and not having options for other people. I mean, just like having childcare. Imagine how many people who have children or families who, you know, one of the many reasons why women fall out of the workforce is because, at least in where I live, having childcare is difficult. So you think about it before you're like, man, that's a big deal if I'm gonna, you know, how's this gonna destroy my career if I have a kid, right?
To that point, which is excellent point, and I'm happy you said it, so I don't need to monopolize again. Kidding. But the daycare, for example, and I was saying all these fantastic things that we did, but again, we are in Switzerland, so we can do fantastic things. Being aware, meaning if you're organizing a conference and you want to be inclusive, you can say, we would love to do a daycare.
Right.
This is the reason we cannot. Is
Yeah.
there a sponsor? Is there, or we
Right.
cannot, we are limited in these ways. Being aware and saying I'm aware
Exactly.
is already enough. You don't have to have a daycare to be inclusive. So that is the point that I would like to underline 15 times. You say, this is what we think is an inclusive conference. This is what we can afford. These things we cannot afford. Either somebody help us. At least we are aware. We are going towards somewhere.
We're trying.
We're trying. Yeah, we know. We see you. We see you. We understand. We are going to try, and so on. So that is actually, I need to repeat. I did not say, please, all conference organizers get the daycare. No. That's not possible all the time.
No, it's
because
not possible. But I
I'm
like this
aware
idea
that
of
Switzerland is very,
very different.
very different. I come from a very different place. So I'm super aware of that. So.
But it's also important that you ask other people, having that awareness can someone help us here?
Exactly.
If you think it's important as a sponsor, if you think it's important to make sure that people with families can also participate in your conference, then how can you help us to achieve this? This is what we want to achieve. How can we achieve it as a community, as sponsors,
Right,
so on
right.
and so forth?
Usually when you ask for help, somebody helps you.
Someone
That's-
will help
That's
you.
just very human.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So I think in the conference realm, these are key activities. Tara, you've worked in tech for a long time.
Really long time.
Really long time.
Old.
But I didn't say that. So you've worked on this issue in the companies you've worked in and in the community. What can companies do? Like, what are the concrete things that we do to build this empathy, to build this awareness into what we do?
Yeah, I mean, I got into
that happen?
management really early. I was 26 when I became a manager for the first time, which was ridiculous. And it was a position that was given to me slightly out of spite. But it turns out that I really like people and working with people. So it became something that I was hyper aware of as a woman. I had a lot of very great mentors and advocates over the course of my career. And thank God, because otherwise I probably would have gone to jail for killing the people who were just being such jerks, because there was that too. I'm half Irish, I can't help it. But there's the things that you hear about, the harassment, the quid pro quo, sort of thing. And yes, that absolutely happens, and it's horrible. But and in some ways, that's easier to address and less likely to happen than the incidental or sort of ignorant behaviors that socially we're kind of indoctrinated to. And so as a manager, my take is that it's part of the leadership team's responsibility to lead the way in how do we establish ourselves as a culture? What do we consider important? The empathy thing is huge, right? And it applies to everyone. I like to say probably one of the toughest demographics to be in certain ways is the white male introvert. Because you think, oh, here's the guy who's got all the power, and here's a guy who's so shy. If you ask him to give a talk, he's going to throw up, right? I mean, it applies to everybody. Yes, see, you're doing great, Hal. But if you're going to throw up, go off screen.
Okay.
So
Promise.
it's the listening aspect. To your point, the listening aspect is amazing. It's hearing what is going on around you. As a manager, part of your job is to facilitate, right? You facilitate differences of opinion between your two principal engineers about how that API is going to be implemented. You also facilitate the discussion for that shy person in the corner who may or may not be a member of an underrepresented community. Statistically, probably is if they're the shy person in the corner. How do you make sure that you hear their voice? How do you make sure that the two loud voices don't completely overwhelm the other voices in the room? They're not doing it maliciously. They're doing it because they're type A personalities with things to say, right? And I'm sure they're very smart. But they're not the only smart people. And as a manager, you want to be making sure that, hey, let's hear from Kiki. You got to speak up more. Other things, making sure that the social events that your team might do. Team building is amazing. I'm not sure how much it happens in Switzerland. I'm assuring it's probably drinking grappa and skiing or whatever it is that you guys do here. But
All
if
the
you have
individual sports.
if you have people on your team who might be Muslim or Mormon or some other community that doesn't drink, then going to the beer garden is probably not a great idea, right? Or maybe there's a group that goes to the beer garden and there's the other group that goes to the tea house. Like, you make it so that people have choices. By the way, ski trips are pretty tough on the disabled. Though, accessible skiing, I love the people who ski on the little cart. I mean, those people are amazing. But not everybody does that, right? So it's little things like that, and just kind of being aware. And it's not that you want to limit it to the greatest common denominator, which is everybody goes to the tea house. You could make it so that there's an assortment of events, or you don't like tea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, please.
The
In my
grappa.
religion, we don't even say tea.
Okay.
as a word. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, tea to
Well,
me
I'm
is coffee
offended.
that's just not trying hard enough. So I mean that's. But anyway, to close out my point is that it's a lifestyle. Like I also give talks on DevOps. DevOps is also a lifestyle.
is, yes.
Right? It's really the approach. If you think about it, you're trying to solve a problem. The problem in this case is how do we as a community, either an open source community or a corporate community, how do we do the best that we possibly can? The best way to do that is to make sure that everybody that is already in that community has a voice because they might have a really good idea.
Yep.
And that when we're looking for people to join our community or we're doing hiring practices, that we're making sure that we are looking in the farthest reaches of any possible sourcing to find those people that actually would be really great. Because they're bringing a new voice that we didn't have before. They're bringing exposures to communities that might be new customers, or they have experiences that would be really beneficial. It's to not think in terms of, well, I'm a colorblind person. I don't see color, and which means everybody is equal, right? Okay. It's a terrible idea. Never think that, right? But it's like, I want to see a lot of colors because all of those colors have something to bring to the table, right? HR departments love me. I'm female, I'm over 40, I'm married, I'm gay, I have kids. Like, you can check off all kinds of boxes. Like, I can fill out a quota so fast, but none of that matters. Oh, and I'm temporarily disabled. I'm klutzy, that's my disabled. I'm klutzy. Hell, you got me beat. The point is, it's something that you need to be conscious of every day. It's not something you just kind of, I'm sure probably a lot of you have gone through diversity training and you probably slept through it, right? I've slept through it. It's terrible because it doesn't really tell you anything useful. It checks off a box, right? True diversity training would be, hey, is there an office in another country that's full of people who speak a language that you don't speak? Again, we're in Switzerland, so that's probably not going to happen. You guys speak every language known to man. But it's just putting yourself out there and being in those experiences as much as possible. One of the beauties of the internet is that we can be in those experiences without actually having to go anywhere in some cases, right?
Yeah.
But it really is kind of a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of constantly paying attention to the people around you and how they act and how they, more importantly, how they react, right? And are you open to how it is that they're existing?
And this is a learnable skill, right?
It is totally learnable. I was the most oblivious person. I mean, we all were, right?
Yeah.
You come out of college, you're an idiot. You don't know anything.
Except for the people in this room who just came out of college.
Right. No. I mean, the fact that you're here,
Congratulations,
the
congrats.
fact that you're here actually shows how much of a not idiot you are because you're already getting out there and meeting people probably from all over the world who've come to this.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop us there, just because we have about nine minutes left. I've been using your watch.
Okay.
9 minutes left for questions. So I'm gonna. Do we have some questions?
We do have some
Okay,
questions.
so I'm gonna hand the.
Actually, you know what, Mike?
Yeah.
Don't move. If you could swing your chair
I
out
can
a little
swing.
bit.
Look at me swing.
I'm just going to mix this up a little because I think some of these questions you can really contribute to as well. Really hard ones. Okay, so first, Hal, you got some props for sharing your story, and I think that has been incredibly meaningful and valuable for all of us to hear. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can we give a?
Yeah.
You know,
So perhaps, Daria, you're going to have the best answer to this, and I might add some color, but it's our most upvoted question so far. And the question is, was there an incident or event in the past that triggered such a strong emphasis on the code of conduct?
you're asking me?
Well,
Heather,
you know, I'm
why
not.
we are doing it now?
Yes.
This way, because I mean there are many incidences constantly happening.
Right.
This is not some. There was, or I don't know. Heather would probably know because she co-founded the Scala Center to start with.
You know, actually, I think for the sake of a constructive, productive conversation that we can all learn from, I would love to hear from you, like, what is the value to the code of conduct? And do you think a code of conduct actually influences behavior or provides
I
escalation
absolutely
paths.
think, of course, it influences, and especially the repetition is what I think it influences. So, the why we are doing it is because there are many incidences, and we want to try to see if this is going to. So we have like it can at some other conferences experience like this is a best practice type of a thing that we are doing now, and we will see. I mean, I would like to ask back, and I will after when I again start my, like, did it change? In my opinion, seeing how people are really gathered and having fun and dancing and going to the diversity lunch, I would say it contributes to that in the direction.
Great.
I have no idea. I will tell you when I do. Thank you for
Anyone
your
else
question.
have thoughts on
Well, I
codes
mean,
of conduct and
I mean, I'm a huge proponent of code of conduct, and I'm not just for conferences, but for open source communities. Open source projects always have a code of conduct, and I can point you last year when the Linux Foundation and Linus Torvalds finally admitted that his behavior, which is fairly notorious over the years, had contributed to problems with contributors in that project. I mean, it sounds like the Scala community has all kinds of fun. Let me tell you, the Linux contributors were not having fun. That was armed battle every day for 20 years. They're trying to change it now, but think about how much more advanced the Linux kernel could be now if they had not gone through that. Well, and they're still going through, trying to recover. I think that's another thing that's really important is that it is harder to change an existing culture than it is to start out with good intent, right? It makes all the difference in the world.
Just to be clear, I only answered that like about the parts of the question why we are doing it now, reinforcing it. But I absolutely believe in code of conduct and also adapting the code of conduct as we go and as we see that certain things need to be included in. So it's like a dynamic
living
thing.
document.
But it quantifies it. It gives you something to point at.
Right.
Say, you know what, we're not making a
100%.
judgment call,
100%.
right? Judgment calls are the death of any group.
Yes.
Thank you. I love this next question. It's an interesting one, and it's now the most upvoted. So, got a lot of votes while we were talking about the code of conduct. Do you think it's fair to put diversity first and professional competence second when talking
Ooh.
about hiring?
Wow.
Fighting words.
I'd love to get your guys' thoughts, and then I
I will sit back and let
contribute.
someone else speak here.
Well, I will speak about this because I don't think there's a such thing as putting.
I think.
They said they don't want my answer. I'm going to tell you real fast before you guys got to run out.
Please take care of the curtain on stage. Sorry, this is a fire alarm. I don't know why, but take care. Move, please. Move from the stage. I'm very sorry about that. But you have to move from the stage.
I had a good answer to the question. Dang it.
Sorry about that.
Somebody was.
Thanks all for coming. Let's go save ourselves from
wow.
sending doom.
Saved by the bell.
Wow.